Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue watching the Paris Hilton documentary. Let's get to it. My name is Dr. Kirk. I'm a therapist and a professor, and when I watch these sorts of things, I often have a lot of things to say. So let's see if anything of interest comes out of my face as I watch the documentary.
Everything. It's a lot, and I don't know what I'm walking into. A couple years ago when I started researching and going into it, and everything was coming back to me, I wanted to do something, but at the same time, I was like, this is going to hurt my brand. I can't have this as part of my business, and, you know, people won't understand. But if I don't do this, it's going to continue to happen, and I'm going to continue to always be traumatized and think about it for the rest of my life.
Okay, so this is interesting. For some people who have been traumatized, it's not always recommended for the safety of the victim. But for many victims and survivors, it can be part of the healing process to fight back, to make the report to CPS, to make the report to the police, to sue them, to raise awareness of what's happening. By gaining that power, you actually will feel more in power of yourself, and you grieve the pain that you went through when you were younger because people are asking you to talk about it. I wonder for Paris if making this documentary and all the press and all the talk that's happening after this documentary aired about a week ago, I wonder if this is healing for her. The other possibility is that it's re-traumatizing to her. And she's kind of exhibiting that right now. She's about to meet up with someone that she was in that school with. And without being careful, if you have a trauma condition, particularly PTSD, you can be re-triggered by these things such that your whole body goes into fight or flight because all the memories come flooding back, and it's too much. It's too much triggering, it's too much emotion, it's too much distress. And that can actually re-traumatize people. And this is something that I learned as I was treating clients with trauma. In the beginning of my career, I was told that when someone has been traumatized and they want to talk about it with you, that you should be honored for that. And I would have clients who would come to me and they would say, you know what, I have a trauma from my childhood that I've never told anyone before, and you're my therapist. I want to finally tell someone about it. And I would feel so honored. And I'd be like, yeah, tell me whatever you want to tell me. I'm here to listen. I'm here to validate. And I would. But then the client would either blow out of therapy, meaning they would never come back to me. And I'd just be wondering, why didn't they make another appointment? We had this huge breakthrough last session. Or they would have massive symptoms for months after that. It wasn't until later that I realized from actual more education and more experience with PTSD and complex PTSD that I learned that when someone starts to come forward with their memories and they want to tell me about it as a therapist, I have to put the brakes on, and we have to do a number of things prior to them telling me their story of trauma. There's a lot of things we need to do. Sometimes when I'm treating people for trauma, it could be years before they actually tell me the story of the abuse, because we have to go through emotional awareness, distress tolerance, distress management, emotional management, trigger management, the ability to monitor your fight or flight response, the ability to pull back from your story and do something else to bring to, it's complicated. Listen to my episodes on trauma therapy. But when you do that, you actually give the client, the person traumatized, the chance to work through or to habituate to the traumas such that there's a little bit of distress, but not overwhelming distress that will re-traumatize them. And by helping them to help themselves with their emotional regulation as they're telling the story or as they're being triggered, they actually will heal and habituate to the memory such that they no longer have symptoms anymore. And I've actually cured people of their PTSD, meaning that they came to me with full-blown PTSD, administered, common PTSD measures, and they were at the top of the charts. And after a period of time, using prolonged exposure and emotional regulation and meaning making and this kind of thing, they have zero symptoms, and I would check in with them later and they would have no symptoms. PTSD is curable, is treatable by therapists that understand trauma, but not all therapists understand trauma. Me, in the beginning of my career, I didn't really get it. I would say I didn't get it at all. I barely understood it. And it took specialized training later on in my career and a lot of experience, because you have to understand dissociation in all its various forms. You have to be able to read people and their emotions really well. You have to be able to explain people the way your body and brain code trauma and the way it reacts to trauma. You have to be able to intuit that really well and also explain it and monitor it. There's so much that you need to learn as a clinician. It's very complicated. Anyway, so I'm worried about Paris in this moment because she's about to meet someone she went to the school with that could be very triggering for her. If I were her therapist, I would work with her, doing a lot of pre-work, a lot of preparation work to make sure that this wasn't going to re-traumatize her. So we'll see what happens.
I think one thing I can say is that they tried really hard to break me. And they caused a few cracks.
I don't think I met your best friend there, but we did find her, Jessica.
Jessica, she was such a badass.
I ended up in an abusive relationship after I left Provo. I'm thinking maybe like being in places where they're abusive to you would make you think that that's a normal way to be.
Right. So it's one of the tragedies of being abused is that it normalizes abuse to you and your body and your mind. And then when it happens in the future, you think, oh, well, this is just life. This is just what happens. And so it just feels normal. And then as the abuse keeps happening, it just feels like, well, I deserve it, or everyone's like this, or this is just my life now, or this is the only way I can get love and attention. I deserve it deep down because I'm a bad person, because I've been told my whole life I've been a bad person. There's a lot of this in society, I'm telling you. There are so many children, teenagers, adults of all ages who have these schemas as a result of trauma and abuse.
There's a bunch of police reports we were able to gather, like from 2011 to 2014, 56 calls of assault to Provo Canyon School and 25 calls to the police in regards to sexual offenses. I'll also forward to, if you want to show this to your parents at all.
I love this. No, I want to. I'm just like processing this again.
Okay, I don't know, but it looks like she's being triggered right now, that memories of assault are emerging from her again. Normally she's able to keep that at bay and not have those memories and feelings flood back in. It looks like she's having that right now. And by the way, if you watching suffer from PTSD, you definitely want to slow down with all these videos and really anything that I do, because we sometimes run into this sort of thing. You want to monitor yourself. You want to check in with your body. How's your heart rate? Usually anxiety is in our chest. We usually feel it there. How's your breathing? Even people who haven't been traumatized, this can be very tense. So you want to, take care of yourself. You don't want these sorts of things to cause you damage. And so particularly for people with PTSD, taking a break, or maybe not even watching these kinds of things, because your trauma might be so similar to this, or this might be so triggering to you that you want to take a break. You don't want to just continue watching without checking in with your body. And for some of you, you've been traumatized so greatly that you're not even necessarily aware of what's happening in your body, because you learned it was better to cut yourself off from that. And so if you are one of those people, you might not know that you're rising in distress level until you're already a 9 out of 10. And so in those situations, you might want to just better safe than sorry and avoid stuff like this altogether. And I employ everyone, find a trauma specialist. Therapy can help with trauma. It can help if you have the right therapist. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a month. Sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes it takes 25 years. But it's worth it. Every step of the way is worth it.
It's not easy. We all have to get to that point where we're ready to open up about it.
Yeah. I don't know if you have nightmares, but I have nightmares almost every night of me being taken.
Ever since I got kidnapped at 16, like a pin drops and I wake up. This hypervigilance of every situation. And I think I still take that with me in work and stuff like that, where I'm scoping out how do I get out of here? What's in the situation?
Yeah. So the two of them are describing classic PTSD. Nightmares every night. Hypervigilance, she said, worrying that at any moment someone's going to get you. It's not rational. You could talk to these two and you could be like, is it rational to believe that someone's going to get you? And they'll be like, no, I know rationally. But our rational mind is but a tiny portion of our body and our brain. And so the rest of our psyche and the rest of our body is not convinced because it learned something different long ago. The body is in a constant state of, oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God. And the mind is like, hey, everything's okay. But like I said, most of us is not convinced by that.
I feel the exact same way about everything. Even with love and relationships, I never fully open because I don't even know how to.
One thing I've also seen with other survivors is that because the lines of tough love and abuse are so blurred, that it's really easy to not see the signs of abuse ahead of time in a relationship.
Okay, that's an interesting statement. So she's saying that the line between tough love and abuse is so blurred that when I'm in a romantic relationship, we can't tell necessarily if we're being abused or if someone is justifiably upset at us. It's a very interesting statement.
We just got in an argument. I was trying to leave his house, and he just got really mad. Just was grabbing me and pulling me. I don't really remember most of it, because I've had worse stuff happen. Just been strangled and phones thrown at me, computers.
So that's also traumatic. You can add that to the list of reasons why she might have a trauma condition, for sure.
And I accepted it because I almost thought it was normal. I was like, oh, he loves me so much that he's going this crazy. And I just wanted love so bad that I was willing to accept being hit or yelled at or screamed or strangled or a lot of things.
Right. I think a lot of intimate partner violence survivors can relate to that.
Even the tape, that never would have happened if I hadn't went to Provo. I was just so lost and desperate for love that I found the worst possible person. After being at that school, I just didn't want anyone to know, and I didn't want to be embarrassed. I was so obsessed with looking perfect on the outside. That's why I always have to project basically what I think the public wants.
Interesting. So that could be another reason why she's so focused on approval from the masses and getting $1 billion, is because if people approve of her, then she's safe and no one's going to cart her off to a child prison.
And now I see even little girls who are 10 years old, 9 years old, and they're trying to get the perfect selfie. They're putting the filters on. They can't even look at themselves on the phone without putting a filter. I can't even imagine being a 13-year-old girl today.
Do you feel responsible for it? And many people have said you're the architect of that.
I do feel responsible for it.
I wouldn't blame her for it myself. I would blame our society. I mean, she didn't just spring out of nowhere. She came from our society as well. And our society is the same, if not worse than it was when she was coming up. So, by society, I mean, we teach kids that they need to be something other than themselves often. They need to have different noses and different hair and different skin tone and different personalities, different body style, different height, different background, different accent. All sorts of things we teach everyone in our society, including kids, that they need to be different. They can't be who they are. They need to buy these products and then they will be this. They need to have this app on their phone and they will be this. And so Paris is not to blame for that.
You're not going to be the only one.
Yes.
The sample photos I sent you, those are from other girls that were in other programs, but I think it kind of maximizes your some of the skills you have as far as social media and raising awareness that way.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love it.
The whole campaign about breaking code silence is about coming out and saying, this happened to me, and it kind of empowers others who they were ashamed about talking about before.
I've never discussed this publicly with anyone, so.
Okay, so we saw a couple people on social media participating and raising awareness of what happened to them. And they say, I couldn't see everything that was said, but both of them said that the experiences they had in these troubled teen industry organizations gave them CPTSD. That's complex PTSD. Well, in a nutshell, complex PTSD, so in a nutshell, PTSD is when we have a trauma, like being at war, being in a car accident, being abused, witnessing something that was scary to us, some sort of terror that we feel, a lot of fear, a jolt of a lot of fear in the moment. And afterwards, later down the line, we have symptoms, something reminds us of it and we're triggered, or memories are constantly flooding us, or our body just kind of shuts down because we just can't deal with the constant distress levels that are happening over and over again. Hypervigilance, there's a whole variety of symptoms. Well, complex PTSD is PTSD, but the problem is complicated by the fact that the traumatic element, the traumatizing thing, was someone that you should have been able to depend on. A family member, for example. A parent is usually the person. And so not only do you have PTSD, but you associate relationships with the trauma. So if you go to war and you come back with PTSD, you associate helicopters or loud noises or bridges or people yelling or gunfire or whatever, things associated with war, that will trigger your PTSD reactivity. But if you were abused by your father, or you were abused by a human that was supposed to take care of you, then you can develop complex PTSD because you don't trust humans. So if you come back from war, you might not trust people that are reaching into their pocket because you think they're going to pull out a gun. Or you might not trust bridges because that's a lot of IEDs will happen on overpasses, so as you're driving under an overpass. So those are things that you avoid or that are triggering to you. And that can be very debilitating, but not as debilitating as being triggered by other humans, particularly humans that are close to you. So as you get close to people, because you need that will trigger you and you'll have a lot of distress and you'll run away from that. And people, like therapists, are also the people who can help you with your trauma. So that also complicates things. A lot of people who need therapy, going to therapy actually will trigger them. For her, I'm guessing she had therapists who were supposed to, or at least clinicians who were supposed to be helping her at this child prison, as I keep calling it. And they triggered her, they traumatized her. And so when she thinks about going to another clinician, maybe she also is triggered in that moment and can't go. At the very least, doesn't trust those people to actually help her because she's been proven otherwise. That, in a nutshell, is complex PTSD.
Talk to people, I'm sure, because no one knows.
Oh, yeah. But, it's the right thing to do to help kids.
Definitely. I can't even imagine the fact that they have 9-year-olds in there now.
8-year-olds, no less. 8-year-olds.
And these parents have no idea.
Now, I want to say, is it guaranteed that these 8 and 9-year-olds are being mistreated? No. It's possible that they're not being mistreated. Now, I will say that when you separate kids from the people that they're supposed to be with attachment-wise, that almost always has some kind of an effect. So I should actually broaden this to any boarding school that you send kids away to. Privileged, rich people will often send their kids away to boarding school because it's very prestigious to do so. Often, if not always, create massive attachment disruptions for the child. To be left alone, to be victimized at the boarding school, to be rejected like that, can very much affect someone's attachment style. I've treated adults and young adults who went to boarding schools, and from what I can tell, a big portion of their attachment injury was because they were sent away to boarding school. And the family thought it'd be a good idea. He's 15, he's so smart, he's going to benefit from this other thing. And the kid might even think ooh, this is quite an opportunity. But to stare into the darkness every night, wondering who are these people next to me? Where are my parents? Do my parents love me? Are they thinking about me? Does anyone love me? Teenagers need that. They're not 35 years old. Even 35-year-olds need that. and particularly teenagers. They're not little adults, they're children.
When I saw The Simple Life, I cracked up. I'm like, that's not real.
That was some straight up bullshit, especially like when she was like, I don't know how to use a mop.
I've never cleaned in my life.
That's the thing too. Like after all we went through, like how we were like forced to clean, like you know how to use a sponge. You know how to wash a dish.
Okay, interesting, who knows, but maybe Paris put on that persona because she was trying to distance herself from the humiliation that she went through in that school.
People were to look at me like, whoa, Paris has a lot of issues.
Don't worry, I've got a lot.
The
Not
thing
my
is
fault.
that like these issues aren't issues that you like decided to create one day and have and walk around in the world with. You know what I mean? This isn't your shame. It's not her shame or hers or mine. It's their f***ing shame.
That's beautiful. It brings a tear to my eye, literally. Just beautiful. It's not your shame. If you've been abused, it is not your shame. It is the shame of the abuser. It was not your fault. You did not deserve it. It was a criminal act, an immoral, terrible act that someone else did, that they should be ashamed of, that they should be wronged for, that they should be stigmatized for, not you. You survived something. You lived through it. You're strong because you're still here. It's not your fault. You should have a medal pinned to your chest the way soldiers do when they come back from war. A Purple Heart, if you will. It is not your fault.
We've just been carrying it.
Amen. My name is Catherine McNamara, and I'm a survivor of Provo Canyon School.
I was force-fed. I was cut off from friends, family.
So that breaks my heart. For her, she said fear of therapy. It's just terrible. And some of these prisons have therapists employed there. And I don't know what to say about that.
I witnessed and endured physical abuse, restraints, emotional, mental abuse. I was forced onto medications. I was taught that everything that happened to me was all my fault. I'm speaking out because no child deserves to be punished for expressing their feelings. Especially when that punishment just equals more torture and more trauma. It had to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've said this yet. I think it's obvious that some of the kids in these child prisons are being abused by terrible parents and being treated terribly by the parents. And they aren't well-meaning parents. Or they're trying, but by any measure, these are not good enough parents. As a reaction to that as a child, you just want to strike back. You just want to say, like, no, you can't do this to me. And you're 14 and you don't have very mature ways of fighting back. And parents have all the power and they control the narrative, and then they'll put kids like this into these schools as well. That certainly can happen.
I just came up here because there was just so much to take in. I was like, oh my God, like, I'm not alone. It's not me and it's not my fault. And sometimes I feel like so many things, but sometimes like this robot and this character that I did and talking with them, like I started remembering who I was before. And just, I don't know.
Okay, so your heart breaks for her. I hope your heart breaks for her if you have half a heart. And she's saying that after the trauma, she became a robot, and the persona that she put out into the world was a robot. Well, what does that mean? Well, it could mean that she was cutting herself off from her feelings. She was trying not to be who she was because who she was got abused. She was trying not to feel her feelings because to feel her feelings is to have overwhelming sadness and fear and pain. And right now, it's all coming flooding back for her. So I don't know what she's experiencing right now, if it's just an existential sadness and flooding, like, oh my God, I remember who I was before the trauma. And you'll hear people say that who have been traumatized. They'll go into such a state post-trauma of trying to cope and survive. They will go through recovery and remember, oh, I remember I used to have a spark in my eye. I used to believe in myself. I remember that. If the trauma that happened to them was later on and they have a self that they can remember prior to that moment, because some kids are abused from the day they're born. I don't know if that's what she's experiencing. It sounds like it is, at least in part, or if she's having her PTSD triggered right now and her distress is going through the roof. She gives a little sign of that in that she was, remembering all the memories, and she had to leave them and come upstairs to her closet by herself. Maybe her closet is like her safe place. I don't know. So I worry about her right now because she could be re-traumatizing herself by exposing herself too much, too fast to the memories without therapy.
It makes me sad they took that away. But I don't know, I'm just so confused. But it's refreshing and new. I don't really know anyone besides my family members and a very small amount of people that knew me before all of this happened and before I became this, this thing. I don't know.
She seems very real to me in this moment. And it's an interesting contrast. And it makes me wonder about all the other people that are that are putting forth a persona that I have completely believed. Makes me wonder about how many other people are doing what Paris is talking about, what she has been doing. Have they sufficiently tricked us into believing that that is who they are, and they're trying to hide something that is in a lot of pain and is very afraid? Of course, people are traumatized. We all understand that, and famous people also can have trauma histories. We all understand that.
You are a warrior. We all are. We're all survivors. We're all warriors. And I don't want anyone to ever feel the way we do.
I'm really happy for Paris and the others and all the other survivors of any kind of trauma watching this show. I think Paris is doing something really great with her fame. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which I react to the real story of Paris Hilton, which is available on YouTube. It was interesting. A well-made documentary and raises awareness for a particular kind of trauma and I think trauma in general. And I wish that more celebrities would use their power and fame along these lines. So I commend her for that. If you have been traumatized, if you wonder if you've been traumatized and have a trauma condition, PTSD included, please seek out therapy. Seek out someone that specializes in trauma. You might just call them up and say, do you specialize in trauma? Make sure that they do, because it's important that you get proper treatment from a proper clinician. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.